the road. You've been talking to the National Weather Service. What all's going on out there?
Yeah, so I've been out since about 10:30, 11 o'clock this morning, and it is slowly deteriorating, guy. And I expect by the end of the night, say probably between 8 or 9 o'clock, we won't be able to see the roads.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think Indy DPW is trying to. They're doing a good job, but here's the problem. This is one continuous system, and this is what I get from talking to the National Weather Service. One continuous system with a little bit of a lull tomorrow morning, but a more significant up ramp Sunday that could bring about an inch an hour through
Yeah.
tomorrow night. So by Monday, we're going to be under snow.
Yeah, what I had a thought of is that just looking at what the forecast per hour look like going forward, it looks like we could get lulled into a false sense of security. Like, this afternoon and this evening, even maybe overnight, doesn't look too bad. And then tomorrow is when the heavier snow is likely to get here.
Yeah, so I was also at the airport, as you alluded to, and there were, God, I was there 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There were 25 cancellations. By the time I left at about 3 o'clock, it was up to 50. I was talking to people from New Jersey, Denver, Colorado, Chicago. All those flights going to Chicago are canceled. One guy was flying to Philadelphia. He had to push his flight up. He had tickets to the Illinois Purdue game
Oh,
today,
wow.
but he couldn't go because he said his flight was going to be canceled. So he took an earlier flight, and he's going to a city with even more snow. But a lot of people were just saying, "Look, we've flown before, but we're just trying to get ahead of this because once the snow starts falling, it's really hard to cancel your flight. You're stuck in a place you may not know about, Indianapolis, for days and days and days. So people just trying to get out of town."
Yeah, and what a lot of people don't see right off the bat too, like you're at the airport and you're looking out the window saying, "Hey, there's less than an inch of snow on the ground. Doesn't seem to be coming down that hard. Why are all these flights getting canceled?" Where a lot of that can be because the aircraft can't get here
Right.
because they're trying to come from airports that have already been hit with the heavier snow out
Right.
west. And so if the aircraft can't get here, for you to get on that aircraft, make your flight, well, that flight gets canceled as well. So a lot of times it's not necessarily the weather right here on the ground in Indianapolis that dictates how many flights necessarily get canceled.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the pattern I noticed is Detroit, Chicago, Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York, and Boston, cities up in the Northeast. Those flights are canceled. Some are delayed in the Midwest. Out west, they're still on time, but that may not be the case tonight, later tonight when the snow, because we're talking about hundreds of million, 140 to 150 million people affected in 40 states
Yeah.
over the course of 3 days. So this is significant. This is impactful the most to the country.
So just to kind of summarize for folks here, before we get on with the Gun Guy show, what can they expect here the rest of this evening going into tomorrow, weather-wise?
Deteriorating conditions. Road conditions are going to deteriorate. I don't think Indianapolis has enough plows on the streets to keep up with the snow. The snow's not going to stop until later tonight, early Sunday morning. It's going to stop for a couple of hours and expect it to ramp back up with intensity of up to an inch an hour through tomorrow night. So just stay home if you can. Most things are canceled, but I would suggest just staying put and staying home and cuddling with your loved ones.
Well, thank you so much for that. Thanks for coming in here to the studio. Ryan Hetrick from the WIBC Newsroom. Ryan, thanks so much, man.
Thanks
Be
for
safe
having
out
me.
there yourself.
Brother.
Well, as we get into
You're just minutes away from another severe weather update. Brought to you by Chapman Heating and Air Conditioning.
Well, thanks again to Ryan Hetrick from the newsroom for coming in and updating us on the weather. We're going to have another update after the first hour, going to the second hour. Plus, at the bottom of each hour, you'll hear from the WIBC newsroom as well as the storm desk, as you just heard, on updates as well. So throughout the Gun Guy show, we're going to keep you advised on the weather, and I'm sure that'll continue throughout our broadcast schedule here this afternoon. So getting into our normal topic here on the Gun Guy show, what's going on the Second Amendment front, I was fascinated to see just this week that a former school resource officer from Uvalde, Texas, and you remember the horrific school shooting we had in Uvalde, and one of the reasons it was so tragic, heartbreaking, and frankly frustrating to a lot of us is that police were on the scene. for a total of what's been consistently reported, for a total of 77 minutes before they eventually confronted this shooter and ended that shooting. And school kids and administrators, teachers, were getting killed pretty much throughout that entire time. And you've seen the videos of police officers lined up in the hallway, standing around, taking no action. And the most egregious of the failures to act among the various police officers who responded to Uvalde. And listen, this is not an indictment on law enforcement generally. We've seen many examples, really even all the way back since Columbine, of heroic police officers who arrive on scenes of a potential mass shooting, whether it's a school shooting or otherwise, and they, with no hesitation, charge toward the threat, put themselves in harm's way, trying to save innocent lives. And so we've absolutely seen the other end of the spectrum. But what happened in Uvalde is quite different. You had a school resource officer on scene who stood outside for several minutes, taking no action whatsoever. Then once other responding officers showed up, and in fact, once a SWAT team showed up, the local police chief ordered them to stand down and to do nothing, again, for a total of something like 77 minutes. And I'm trying to imagine, being in that school, hearing the sound of gunshots and the screaming of children and taking no action as a sworn police officer. It's frustrating. And they even prevented parents who showed up from taking any actions themselves. Well, that school resource officer was actually put on trial for child abandonment, child endangerment, and was named in multiple counts of just that on behalf of multiple. I believe the number was 22 of the kids that were either murdered or others that were wounded. And he was tried to a jury on those criminal charges. So this is not a civil lawsuit. It's actually 29 counts. I'm looking now at the lawsuit. 29 counts of child abandonment or endangerment. And those were for 21 Texans. This is school children and teachers who were murdered and others who survived their wounds. But 29 counts of child abandonment or child endangerment tried to a jury, and he was found not guilty on all charges. And listen, a jury heard the facts from the witnesses, from the documents, from the videos, heard instructions on the law on what the obligations are or are not of a responding police officer, and applying the law to the facts, decided that this gentleman, Adrian Gonzalez, school resource officer from Uvalde, was not guilty of any of the charges, fully acquitted him. He stood up, he hugged his lawyer, and they walked out of the courtroom. And he's a totally free man. And it's somewhat ironic. And obviously Gonzalez is a very, very common name with Hispanic origins. But it's somewhat ironic that his name's in Gonzalez because a Supreme Court case from 2005 is a case that I cite often, and I refer to often for the proposition that a police officer actually has no legal duty to protect private citizens. There is no legal, the Supreme Court ruled exactly so. There is no legal duty to protect private citizens, such that, and this was the Gonzalez versus Castle Rock case from 2005, such that a lawsuit against police officers who knew about a restraining order protecting a mother and 3 of her children who failed to take any action whatsoever to enforce that restraining order, resulting in the murder of the woman's 3 children by her estranged husband. She sued saying, they knew about the restraining order. I asked them to enforce the restraining order. I asked them to help me. After having obtained that restraining order, police took no actions whatsoever, and as a result, my 3 children were murdered. And the Supreme Court said there is no legal duty for a police officer to protect a private citizen. So you have the Supreme Court in Castle Rock versus Gonzalez saying that. You have a jury applying the law of Texas on child abandonment and child endangerment, after a police officer stands around and does absolutely nothing for a substantial period of time as children are murdered, and that jury came back and said, nope, no responsibility on a criminal side. So the Castle Rock case from the Supreme Court says no civil liability. And at least as to the facts of the Uvalde case and the law of Texas, no criminal culpability as well. Where does that leave us? That's what we'll go into when we come back. In the meantime, we'd be glad, as always, to take your calls. Join the discussion, 317-239-9393. That's 317-239-9393. This is Guy Relford on The Gun Guy Show on 93 WIBC.
Severe weather is on the way.
We got snow coming. We need some salt on the roadway.
We may get a little bit of a lull late Saturday evening, but that does not mean we've blown the forecast. More snow develops.
Now expected to impact more than 40 states.
We're talking